Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. So I had the homie on G. Bush the other day, and we were talking about SHEDEUR because I really want to understand his fan base as much as his fan base sometimes. It's not a big fan of mine. I want to understand them so I can be fair to them and kind of understand where they're coming from on certain things, because sometimes it can be hard to really break down. And G. Bush said something to me that really made all the things click in place. We were talking about SHEDEUR, and he was like, hey, one of the things you have to understand is that SHEDEUR has been famous his entire life, and he's been on television for most of his life, right? He was on a reality show growing up. This isn't just some famous guy's kid. This is a famous guy's kid that a lot of people, including a lot of rich and powerful celebrities, have watched grow up through their phones, through television, much like how everybody had intrigue with LeBron James's son, Bronny James and Bryce James, and how their household names and how everybody's kind of familiar with their stories, despite the fact that they haven't really done much. It's because they are themselves like people we watch grew up. And the reason that made it click to me, as far as all the discourse around SHEDEUR, why it's so difficult to talk to SHEDEUR, and why some SHEDEUR fans don't seem to want to even acknowledge any negatives in SHEDEUR's game, is because SHEDEUR Sanders is the first of his kind. He is the NFL's first parasocial quarterback. Now, here's what I mean by that. The word parasocial gets a negative rap, right? People usually just claim it as negative no matter what. But all parasocial is a defining term. And what parasocial means is that you have a relationship with somebody that feels personal, but it's one-sided. Some of you might have a parasocial relationship with me. You watch my videos every day. You listen to me talk on my podcast. I put a lot of stuff out there. And because of that, you know a lot about me. But I might not know a ton about you, because that relationship goes one way there, right? With SHEDEUR, it's the same way. There's a lot of people who know about a lot of things that went on in SHEDEUR's life. A lot of things that ain't got nothing to do with football, right? They know about SHEDEUR and, him dealing with the dynamic between his father and SHEDEUR's mom. Like, they know about other struggles SHEDEUR has dealt with, and SHEDEUR and Shiloh growing up. To a lot of people, it feels like, and they're aware of it. Everybody's aware that the parasocial relationship is a parasocial relationship, but to them, they feel like they are related to SHEDEUR in a way, because they know stuff about SHEDEUR almost at the level, at least like perception-wise, of somebody you're related to. And look, we could all be judgmental of this. I know there's some people who don't have that parasocial relationship with the Sanders family that are going to be super judgmental of this. Like, I would never have such a thing. But everybody does this. There are people in my life that I have a parasocial relationship with. There are people in your life, even if you're not a Sanders fan, that you have a parasocial relationship with. It is a normal part of a always online society, right? This is just the norm now. Everybody has some kind of parasocial relationship. If you're under a certain age, if you grew up on the internet, there are creators that you feel really close to because you've watched their story over years and you're really attached to them. Maybe you're really defensive about them. It's why fandom feels more intense now, right? Like, for me, for fandom, for stuff like that, I don't usually get to the point to where I feel the need to be so defensive about something that I feel the need to fight over it or something like that, right? But that's not the case anymore with a lot. Some people get really connected to these things, and that's because, well, it's bigger than that for a lot of people, right? Your favorite podcast that you put on every day before you go to work, it might feel like them your friends for real, because you're learning and you know a lot about them. They don't know you, but you know a lot about them. That's the design of this. Shedeur's the first NFL quarterback where that's the case. There have been other quarterbacks where people felt strongly about for one reason or the other, right? Colin Kaepernick, people felt strongly about it because of the social justice stand that he took, right? Not kneeling, deciding to kneel for the national anthem, which a lot of people got behind and a lot of people got mad at. But it wasn't like you felt like you knew Colin Kaepernick, at least at that time. He was just a vessel for a larger conversation that, quite frankly, we were already having in this country by the time that Colin Kaepernick made the stand, right? He was just in the middle of that conversation. He took a side in that conversation, and then he became that conversation. But you never felt like you knew Colin Kaepernick, right? Another quarterback that people throw out there is like, oh, well, maybe there was a parasocial relationship with him was Tim Tebow. I think there's a stronger case here for Tim Tebow. I think there were aspects of people's relationship with Tim Tebow, but again, Tim Tebow was really just a part of a larger conversation, right? Because what Tim Tebow and what blew up Tim Tebow's popularity around that time, people forget this, is the argument and conversation around how public he was with his religion, whether that is something that should be embraced or something that should be discouraged. He became a conversation for a whole culture war thing, right? When it comes to Tim Tebow. But people didn't really feel like they knew Tim Tebow. They knew a lot of things about Tim Tebow. There's definitely some parasocial aspects to it, but it wasn't like you watched Tim Tebow grow up, right? So SHEDEUR, on one hand, has this parasocial following from being on reality TV, right? You watch Shiloh Sanders steal a car and SHEDEUR say something to Shiloh about it as a kid, right? Like you've seen this dude as an 8-year-old. You knew his personality when he was 8, and then you watch him grow up and you watch him become a college football player and you watch him go to Jackson State, you watch him go to Colorado. There is a deeper attachment there than what is normal. It is a strong parasocial relationship that people have with them. And it's why when you arguing with people about SHEDEUR, it don't feel like you arguing with a fan, right? It feel like you arguing with a family member when you be arguing about SHEDEUR, right? When you're like, oh, SHEDEUR hasn't done this and that. The arguments you get back aren't of the arguments that you get from fans. They're the arguments you get from family. I know this because I know what it's like to argue with players' families. They've gotten mad at me before. Not often. I try not to disrespect players to the point to where their families feel a need to try to check me. But there's been some times where I've had to tell the truth about a player. The family doesn't appreciate it. And you hear from the family and you argue with the family, and it feels like how it feels to argue with a regular person about SHEDEUR, because there's that parasocial aspect to it. Now, SHEDEUR has a unique combination here that makes him truly special. There is that parasocial aspect of him, which, by the way, is going to be normal in the future, right? Like, we're talking about the most online generation of all time coming up and starting to get of age to be in the NFL, which means that there's going to be a lot of players people have a parasocial attachment to, right? A lot of these dudes are streaming. A lot of these dudes have their own content. A lot of these dudes have their own fan bases now. Like, yeah, you're going to have to get used to this parasocial aspect of sports talk and talking about sports. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to argue with you like they in their family and not as a fan, which, look, parasocial relationships in themselves, they're not inherently bad. There's been studies about this, right? There are some positives to parasocial relationships, but like anything, they need to be kept in check. Like, you should be aware that that's not really your auntie or your cousin or your nephew, right? You shouldn't be out here dying on a hill for somebody who ain't really your uncle, right? We gotta find the balance, certainly, because I hear the weird shit some people say about me, like they know me, they don't know me. It gets strange. Okay, like I understand it, but it's not an all bad thing. But that's one part of the Shedeur fandom, and then the other part is very similar to the Tim Tebow. It's very similar to the Colin Kaepernick, right? Where Shedeur is also a stand-in for a larger conversation that people were already having, right? Which is the NFL and the NFL's history of racism when it comes to the quarterback position. Shedeur has become a part of that conversation because he fell in the draft so publicly, and it was so humiliating how he fell in the draft, right? Like there have been draft slides of guys who they thought would go in the first round, but no draft slide has lasted as long as Shedeur's has. You can argue whether it's justified or not, and his play will justify it or not. But this conversation wasn't happening at the same, like Brady Quinn was a guy who fell in the draft. And everybody thought to themselves, yeah, after Brady Quinn's career, that fall was justified, right? So, we're going to have these conversations throughout somebody's career, right? There's ways that Shedeur can outplay it. There's ways that Shedeur can become a part of it. But he's also that, right? Like a lot of people are having that conversation when it comes to Shedeur. And then they're also coming at it from the aspect of somebody who feels a little bit more connected to Shedeur than they actually are. And that's why I think the discourse is so crazy around Shedeur, why it's so difficult to have a normal conversation about Shedeur, and why it feels like there are just certain people who are incapable of being normal, why every single interaction that Shedeur has or does not have is being put under a microscope because people feel more connected to this than maybe they should. We're going to talk about this more in just a second, but I got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. So we kind of broke down why it is so difficult, right? Because I do think it's important that we understand this, right? Because I think so many people have took a very dismissive approach. And sometimes I have taken a dismissive approach. Like, I don't like it when people don't want to talk about like what's actually happening, and people want to talk about like, how they feel about shit. Like, I'm not really into that. I don't know if you guys have caught on to that with me. I'm not a big fan of those kind of arguments. So I could tend to be a little dismissive when I see people say ridiculous shit, in my opinion, right? And I'm like, I'm not a big fan of it. But hearing that and really having that aspect of that understood, it makes me understand just like exactly why I'm arguing and having some of these arguments that I've been having. And honestly, it stops me from having them arguments, right? Like, I'm not about to convince somebody who feel like they Shedeur cousin that Shedeur not good. That's the same approach I take whenever you do upset somebody in the player's family about your opinion about that player's play. It's like, I'm not going to make you change your mind about your nephew. Why would I even continue to argue? Like, I'm going to say what I said. I'm going to defend my professionalism. I'm going to defend myself as a professional. But after that, I'm not going to convince you that your cousin's not that good. I'm not going to convince you that your nephew's not going to make it. Right? Like, I'm not going to convince you that your uncle or whatever it is actually the best prospect and I'm wrong about this. Right? I'm not going to convince you to go against your family. I get that. And when you argue with some people about Shedeur and it feel like it's bigger than football for them, it's because it is. Doesn't mean that they're right. It just means arguing with them is a waste of time. Like, I'm being real. Like, there's no amount of stats, no amount of tape you're going to show some people to convince them that your opinion of Shedeur is correct and theirs is wrong. Because they don't want to believe what you're saying. Because they want to believe in Shedeur. And the reason they want to believe in Shedeur is because they feel extra connected to him in the Sanders family. We can talk about whether that's a bigger problem in society when I have a different job and I'm not doing football, because that's not a football conversation. But that's kind of what it is. And I think that's something we should all keep in mind. And also something that we should keep in mind going forward. Because if you think SHEDEUR is going to be the only parasocial athlete in the NFL, I got news for you. There's going to be parasocial wide receivers, parasocial offensive linemen, parasocial tackles. We are living in the age of technology. We're living in the age of always online. And the kids that are coming up now, Gen Z, Gen A, they have been always online for their entire life, which means more of them are going to have a history of content, a history of backlog, a backlog of internet stuff that people are going to be connected to, and people are going to feel more connected to than maybe they should. That's what we're in. SHEDEUR's the first player, the first parasocial quarterback, and he's possibly the first parasocial player in what's going to be in the next 10, 15 years, a very parasocial era of sports talk. It's going to be interesting. See how that goes. I know some of you are hearing these words and not excited about it. But hopefully we can navigate this in a better way to where it's not as toxic as it is right now. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.